Having a bent prop shaft on a lower unit from a boat is a very common thing, and today's goal is going to be to show you exactly what it would take in order to pull the prop shaft out of a lower unit and either replace it or get it fixed, and then you can make a decision on whether or not it is something that you want to do or whether or not it is something that you want to have a shop do for you, and all the things that go into this process. Now, to confirm that you do have a bent prop shaft, it is very easy. You're going to take a long screwdriver like this, you're going to hold it against the anti-ventilation plate, and you're going to hold it just off of that little circle right there. And what we're going to do is then we're going to make sure that this up here does not move, and we're going to spin this prop shaft to watch this little circle right here to see if it wobbles based on the flat tip of the screwdriver. Okay, you see how the tip of the screwdriver is equal with the top of this circle there? So when I spin this around, you see how this is now in the middle of that circle? And then if I spin this more, oh, even there's the worst. So that's almost down past halfway down. And then I just keep spinning around, and now it is back to the top of the circle. So this is clearly a bent prop shaft. There is no getting around that. It gets worse as you go around, and then it comes back around, and it's back where it started. So definitely got a bent prop shaft. So let's start to take this apart in order to show you exactly what it takes to disassemble one of these to get this prop shaft out of here, out of this lower unit. It's going to take some special tools. One thing right here, there are tabs. We're going to need to bend this tab right here. That tab right there needs to be bent over, and once we bend that tab over right there, we'll be able to then take a special tool to put on here to get this spanner nut or gland nut out of the lower unit. Here's the first obstacle that you're going to come into contact with, because you're going to need something like this in order to get that spanner nut off. I like to use these right here, which is a Marine Tech Tools. So Marine Tech Tools, that's what I use. I'll actually link these in the description if you'd like something like that, but we're going to need that tip for this lower unit, which I think is this one right here. So let me put this thing here. It should be this one, but it's not. I need basically the same pattern, only smaller. What about this one? Okay, so that's the ticket. So for an alpha drive, you're gonna need one of these. I don't even have the right one. Mine's not there. I'm just trying to hit it, but I'm fine with just rolling those over. But as suspected, this thing is stuck. We're going to need to heat it up here, or we are going to have to drill this thing out, which you're just going to, right there, you see those little holes? We're going to just drill right there, and then we can take a punch and knock this out into pieces. So one or the other needs to happen. One, heat, and more impact, more power than this. That's the problem with that. So let me work on this. I'm probably going to end up having to drill that out, and let's go, because we got to get this nut out in order to get this carrier out to get the prop shaft out. Yep, no go, time to drill it. Okay, now that we've got our holes drilled, they're pretty close to the edge. That one's all the way out. That one's pretty close to the edge. That one's real close to the edge. We're going to come in here with a chisel, and we're going to hit it like this and break these pieces and pull it out in pieces. Okay, we got the spanner nut out. I didn't drill all the way through it, all the way around like I should have, but at least that's out. This piece is out. We're about an hour into this project. So now we need another special tool, because we need to put something onto here that can then hook into here, and we're going to pull this out with a jaw puller to get this carrier out of here. Once we get the carrier out, then we got to come up here. I don't know if I got to take the shift shaft out or not. I don't know if I have to take that out or not. I got to take the water pump off, water pump plate off, and then we'll be able to get down to the bearing carrier, get that out, And then with this out, we can then take the pinion gear off, pull the drive shaft out, then the prop shaft is going to come out after that. And now we are set up to pull this out. This is a puller, it's a Marine Tech Tools puller. I put a 7/8 inch socket on there. I'm gonna use my impact, and yeah, we'll send this out. Now, some of these don't come out like this, depending on the brand of lower unit that you have. Some of them, the shift shaft has to come out because it comes out with a coupler on it. This one, I believe, doesn't, but we're about to find out. So I'm gonna hit this up, and this should just pull right out of there. All right, so now that we have the carrier out, the carrier, I can't speak, but it's actually in pretty good shape. All of this stuff here is in good shape. If I look down in there, that all looks really, really good. So the next step, in order to get this out, because that forward gear stays on the prop shaft, in order to get the prop shaft out of there, we're going to need to pull the shift shaft, but at the same time I got to pull the water pump housing, the impeller, and then we've got to get that pinion nut right there. We've got to get that nut off of here in order to pull the pinion gear and then pull the drive shaft out of the lower unit. So far you've had to have this tool and then the actual gland nut tool. So there's two special tools so far, and we are just about an hour and 15 minutes into this project, and I have most of the right components that we need to take this thing apart. So let's work on getting this right here apart. Look at this Dubinsky all up in here. Now that we've got our impeller housing, water pump base, and base gasket and all that stuff, bearing carrier, drive shaft bearing carrier, all that stuff's out, you're going to need your next special tool, being this right here. This is another tool that goes on here to take this piece off. Generally, I don't take this off until we get the pinion out, so I need to make sure I got one of these, because I don't know if I really do or I don't. These are not what I'm looking for. I need one of these, but I need the one for this drive shaft, which I ain't got, which is fun, super fun. So let's see, improvise. Maybe the 3/4 12 point. Not gonna work. Well, I don't think I can. I really don't want to trash that socket because I don't think it's gonna fit on here anyway. The one I'm missing is the one I need. I don't have it. Alright, so here we go. Got my adapter on there, 1.25" socket. I gotta get a wrench on there. But I don't have the tool to grab that nut, so the only thing I got thin enough is this adjustable. So I'm gonna try and crack this with the adjustable, getting something thin enough between the pinion and the actual clutch dog. That's kind of the issue here. So I think I've got a grip on the nut. Let me go ahead and see if I can crack this free turning this way. Well, that is not working. I need a really thin 7/8 in order to get on that nut in between there. Ye old good old Pittsburgh from Harbor Freight, $20, 7/8, right on the money. So now what we need to do is I'm just going to take a rag like this and stick it right here to protect the case. Even though with this case the case is trashed, we don't really care about this. This is more for display purposes. But let's go ahead and I'm going to roll this around and we'll knock this nut off, take that out, and we'll pull the drive shaft out. Alright, pinion nuts off, drive shaft bearing carrier nut is removed. we are ready to pull our drive shaft out. There are going to be a bunch of roller bearings that pop out of there. We're going to count them when they fall out, but we're on the home stretch. As soon as I pull this thing out, all that stuff's going to come falling down, but that will be good. So, well, another trick is to get yourself a, there we go, magnet. Magnet is too big. We need a smaller magnet. This one. There you go. A little magnet, stick down in there. Alright, you want to be a little booger, don't it? There we go. One more, there we go. That thing's looks a little burnt, don't it? Smells burnt too. Alright, now this should, I'm gonna have to use 2 hands to get this thing out because our pinion is stuck on there. Well, that is not the way you want to have to do that, but I just stuck my flathead up into this little groove right there. And then I just hit it with the old 3-pound sledge and busted that little piece off of the case there. Busted that off, but at least now my pinion gear will come out of there and the drive shaft will come out of there and I can pull the prop shaft out. So I can do this. There goes all them bearings that we had talked about. Another thing about doing this job is you get a lot of stuff laying everywhere. So now, okay, so there's the pinion. Now we got to get our magnet out and get all the rest of our stuff out of there, which are those roller bearings, as well as there's our pinion nut washer. And here are all these. There's going to be a bunch of these in there. I don't know if there's 18. There might be 20 something, 22, 21. There's different numbers based on the case, but I'm going to pull all these out of there and then we'll be able to pull the prop shaft out, which prop shaft's pretty easy to come out. The shift shaft, you can turn it because it loops on there, but I should be able to just pull it out like that. You see how that thing is right there? That thing hooks on to our shaft down at the bottom. See our shift shaft? Just hooks right onto there. So let me drain this oil out before I go ahead and pull the rest of these bearings. You can see them right there. Those are all gonna fall out. Well, I should probably count them now, huh? Well, this actually works really well because I just stuck my hand down in there. I took my magnet, stuck it right down here, and I literally just pulled out every single one of those bearings and only dropped one. That's a nice little trick. Okay, now we are here. We have our prop shaft. We are now to the point where we actually have the component that we want to mess with. So you can take this little cotter pin off. This thing will spin off. You can take this part off. This will come off. You'll take this little spring right there off to get that pin out. You push that pin out, that clutch dog will come off, and we will be left with our bent prop shaft. Now, to get to this point, as you can see, we damaged our case. Our pinion gear didn't really sustain that much damage. Honestly, I'm surprised. This could be reused. I would not call this a bad pinion gear. So I think we'll be good with that, given the durability of these gear cases. So that's good. But you needed one special tool, 2 special tools. This one, you probably have that. You definitely need a breaker bar. You're gonna need some hammers, 3-pound sledge, that hammer. Let's see, what else? We needed a couple other special tools like the puller. We needed the puller to get the thing out. And we also needed the bearing carrier puller to get this piece off. So there are a lot of tools that we needed in order to get this prop shaft out. But now that we have the prop shaft out, because it's bent, you're basically just going to replace the prop shaft. So based on how much that prop shaft costs, that's the work that it's going to cost, and that's the cost of this. And whether or not that is really worth it to you, I mean, there's a big risk. There's a big risk of getting all this stuff off and not damaging anything more than like what we did here. So now that we have our prop shaft out of the lower unit, you can either replace it or you can try and straighten it. Now, obviously, as you can see from this entire operation, this is not what you want to do, and this is not the way you want to go about it. Obviously, no one wants to go through this entire process. This would be the correct way to do it, and I mean, this is probably the most expensive way to do it. You might as well just replace the entire lower unit because it's not worth going through this hassle. Now, if your case is still in good condition, there are other methods of straightening out depending on how bad it is. There are companies out there that you can pay to do it for as low as a couple $100, which I would go that route before going this route, because this route is just way too much. You don't want to have to do that. So here's a couple ways that you can do this without having to go through this situation. If you have a smaller outboard, I'm talking a 5 horse, a 25, and maybe even like a 50 or a 60, something with a smaller prop shaft. 60 is probably pushing it. Well, what you can do is you can get a pipe like the one off of a jack. You can slide that over the propeller and you can bend the propeller shaft that way. Now, all of these situations can cause damage on the inside, because if you think about this propeller shaft in there with the gears on it, all these gears that are right here, those gears are all on this prop shaft. So if you put a pipe onto here like this and you pull down, you are pushing up on this, trying to bend here. You are pressurizing your bearing carrier because this sits in like this. So right here where your seals are, you're putting pressure to bend this propeller shaft. So you can damage these seals as well as the tapered roller bearing that is on the inside of this. There's a bearing that sits right here, and that is what spins around this prop shaft. You can damage that bearing by flattening that bearing into the race. Again, on smaller outboards, 5 horse, stuff like that, usually that's not the case. You can pretty much get away with doing it and not damaging this. But whenever you get into stuff like this, that it goes to 220 horsepower engines, it's a little bit different. You can potentially damage that stuff. But what you would do for these is you need either a bottle jack or you need an actual jack, like a car jack, like a 2-ton, 3-ton, 4-ton, 5-ton, whatever. And you're going to put the nut on the end of the prop shaft. Then you're going to put the jack in over that, and then the bar that the wheels or the jack are, you're going to set that on the nut, and you're going to jack the jack up against the anti-ventilation plate of the case right there. So you're going to jack against that. Once you roll this around with a dial indicator on it that you can get from Harbor Freight, they're 13 bucks for the stand, and you can get the dial indicator for $10 off Amazon, or you probably get it at Harbor Freight too. You probably get the whole assembly for like 30-40 bucks. But you're going to check the prop shaft with the dial indicator. As you spin it around, you'll find the high spot. You'll put the high spot on the top, and then put that jack in between here on the nut and your anti-ventilation plate and jack it, and that is going to bend the propeller shaft back. Now, it doesn't work every time. Depending on how bad the bend is, it doesn't always work. But it is possible, and that is going to be the best way to go about straightening a bent prop shaft, because otherwise this is what you have to do to get this prop shaft out of the gear case, and that's not really what you want to do, especially if your gear case is in poor condition as is, and if it's 30 years old, you're probably going to damage something when you're taking it apart. So when you take your boat into a marina, a shop, a dealership, whatever, now you have a good understanding of what is going to happen with your engine and how they're going to straighten that prop shaft. Either they're going to go with the bottle jack or the jack, and they're just going to jack it down, probably cost you a couple $100. Boom, you're going to be good to go. The risk is you can potentially mess up your tapered roller bearing on the bearing carrier. It's not very often that happens, but it can happen, or the bearing carrier itself can crack as well, because when you put that tension on there like this is forged steel. This is hard, like this is hardened steel. So when you put that tension on there, you can crack this aluminum bearing carrier. It can crack here. So that is something to consider, but at least now you are very well educated on the issues of a bent prop shaft, how they can be straightened, and the risks that go into it, and why it's going to cost how much it's going to cost depending on the damage of the bend on your prop shaft.